And when my dad did this, there was no internet. So our accessibility to information about real estate investing was not there. My portal, my bigger pockets was my dad.
Go buy your first 5 on your own. You should. And then maybe you've created a system where you can get off market deals and you can churn them out and you can continue that way.
It doesn't matter. I was just fortunate enough that my dad was obsessed with real estate. He was an attorney.
Everyone has something to show and teach. And here's a new formula that I created.
And you just put it on your schedule and you go to every single one in the area, even if it's not a good meetup.
You have just a skill set and a wherewithal in you that 99% of investors today will not go do.
But you're not going to be a good flipper if you don't like houses. You're just going to make cookie cutter crap that maybe it sells okay, but you're not scaling as much as you can.
Jonathan, officially welcome to the Wealth Juice podcast. Corey and I are stoked to have you on the show today, man. We've been following your journey for a long time, and being that you're local, it's an even added benefit for us, man. So thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. It was great having you guys on my show. Who knows, we'll be in a race to see which one comes out first. But yeah, looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Likewise, man. So yeah, it's going to be a nice little swap here on putting you on the other side of the mic. So take us through the beginning of your journey. I think, as we mentioned to you, a lot of our audience, they are aspiring real estate investors, or maybe they have their first couple of units looking to scale. And we know you've done big things. So take us back to maybe pre-real estate, if there's a pre-real estate, and then your light bulb moment when you're like, hey, I'm moving into the game.
Yeah, there actually is no pre-real estate for me because of my dad. So, I mean, my journey is a little different, but it doesn't make it not applicable for people who are getting started in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It doesn't matter. I was just fortunate enough that my dad was obsessed with real estate. He was an attorney, as was I. That was my first career out of college, and went to law school and then was an attorney. But I was always doing real estate because he was always doing real estate. So when I grew up, I didn't really I just thought real estate investing was something that you did on the side of your regular job because it's smart money. And all my dad did was talk about money and real estate. And in between, he would make it accessible and take me to get video games and stuff. So it wasn't like he was always trying to bombard me with information. But I walked hundreds of properties before I was 18. My dad owned a lot of rental properties in the Westchester area of New York. I knew all the tenants, so I learned about landlording on the way up. And then I actually eventually became the landlord with my sister for a lot of those properties. So we really kind of ran more of not a family office, which is more syndication, but a family business. And my sister and I eventually took that over after my dad passed away.
Got it. Okay. So you kind of were born into this game a little bit, if you will. I want to talk to you, or really ask you about maybe what are some of the differences in between the way that your dad did things and then maybe the way you do things, and like how did you find the tools from what he taught you, but then refine them to be your own? And we'll get into like some of the first deals that you actually did too. Yeah. But I'm curious about like old school, new school. Maybe now you feel old school. There's a new school coming in, but like what's the parallels and then some of the differences?
I'm still old school with an emphasis on the old. But yeah, I mean, remember, like when I was doing this as a kid and when my dad did this, there was no internet. So our accessibility to information about real estate investing was not there. My portal, my bigger pockets was my dad. He was my rich dad, poor dad. He was just like, I didn't know anything other than him telling me stuff. So it's a different landscape now. But what I will say is what we did back then, everyone can still do now. It's just that a lot of people are getting thrown off by all the technology. And I love technology. Technology is great. But the tried and true way to buy real estate, absolutely nothing has changed. Just the amount of data that you may have when you approach has changed and the way that you approach. But I would say actually the old way is a much better approach, which is building relationships because I can't text you. I can't stalk you on Facebook, knocking on a door, saying, hey, what we did a lot, which you can still do, is we went to yard sales. We went to 9 or 10 yard sales every single weekend. And I didn't know what the hell we were doing. I was just looking for baseball cards, and video games, which was sweet too. You could just pick up a basketball or get cards while you're there, or just buy all the cards for like 50 cents and then stay up all night looking for Ricky Henderson rookie card. But you can still do that. And at every single yard sale, my dad made an offer on the house or started to build a relationship. And what I learned from him early on was that real estate is all relationships, and that hasn't changed a single bit. And the some part of new investors think that that's not part of it, that you can replace relationships with technology, but technology is a bridge so you can get in the door. You still have to build the relationship.
I love this. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'll tell you why. I think that the information age is a plus and a minus. I think it's a net positive in the end, for sure. But I do think that what I've found is people want to buy their first or next rental property. They come to us, they ask us questions. And I've gotten on calls and people are like, what do you do when the cap rate, and then they're talking about return on equity, and they have a 9 spreadsheets, and they're asking me all these questions. And I said, look, I think what we're doing here is we're making real estate complicated. Yeah. It's actually not very complicated. What I think you need to do is remove 9 or 10 of these metrics, focus on 2, and then you have to understand that this game is going to be a long play, and you got to buy and hold. And I think that that's where people get caught up, is because information is plentiful. It's everywhere. It's left, right. You like everyone has something to show and teach. And here's a new formula that I created, and look at my proprietary product. When in reality, it's very fundamental. It's fundamental.
So think about this. Those people who always say that, and I talk to them all the time, again, nothing against them. I think they're trying. I think they're kind of buying into a system that they think might work. The first question that I ask people who are allegedly in analysis paralysis is, how many properties have you looked at in person? The answer is always the same. It's between 0 and 5. They say, I've looked at over 100 deals. How many do you see in person? None. Great. How the hell do you know anything about houses? Well, how do you even know what you're buying? Have you ever been in a basement? Have you been in an attic? Do you understand what a hot water heater looks like when it's old? That's $2,000. Do you know the difference between a hot water heater and a furnace? Do you know what it looks like when the roof's bad? Do you understand what buying as is when you're a new investor and you're getting sold by a wholesaler on as is, and you're going to give away everything and find an oil tank? So I think part of the problem is that new investors, because of technology, aren't getting enough reps in the field. Like, you need to get reps. You need to hit the tipping point. You need 10,000 hours. I was fortunate that I had a dad that dragged me around, but it wasn't because he was already a real estate investor. It was because he was obsessed with real estate. That's why we looked at so many houses.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Jonathan, the first mentorship that I was in, I don't even know. It might have predated Ryan. It was kind of like a makeshift mentorship. But the first one I was in, I remember, or maybe it was one that we were in together. I don't know. But I ended up hearing about this guy who'd been in the mentorship for 5 years. He'd been in the mentorship for 5 years and he hadn't done a deal.
Yeah.
And I think he's like, this is the year that I'm going to do it. This is the year I'm going to pull the trigger. And my bet, he was an engineer, so you can kind of put the pieces together there. He was in analysis paralysis, stuck so long in it. So this is a long-winded way of me explaining, or really asking the question. And I think you kind of answered it with saying, like, okay, you got to go see properties. But what's the number one way that you have found that has worked for you? Because everyone gets some sort of analysis paralysis at some level. What's the number one way that you found either that has gotten you out of it, or you would tell somebody, I need to remove myself from this? How do you do that, especially in an information age?
Yeah, I mean, I have an answer all teed up, but I will tell you, I'm a very big spreadsheet person, but I've never had analysis paralysis in my life, because spreadsheets are an organizational tool for me. They're not a vetting tool for properties. I have more experience, so I can vet properties quickly. I know how much I can walk into a house and in 5 minutes go, it's 65 for renovation, as long as I've looked in the basement. Like, I'm usually within about $5,000, give or take something behind the walls. But the number one way to get out of analysis paralysis is by going to real estate meetups. It's not even close. And the reason why is because, look, you guys have a podcast. I have a podcast. They're unbelievable. But there's no way to take action on the information unless you can see other people just like yourself who are doing what you want to do. You say, like, oh, wait, because I always say this joke, like, if you go to real estate investing meetups enough and you're brand new, you always go like, hey, you ask like what you think is a busboy to like get you a Coke or something. And the guy's like, no, I'm here. I own 40 units. They're like, but you have Crocs on and shorts and a ripped t-shirt. Yeah, exactly. Because that's what real estate investors really look like. They're not what everybody thinks. So the panic of going to meetup will quickly be overwhelmed and completely be a win when you just meet other people who, you want a house hack. Better meet some house hackers to know how they did it. You want to buy a 4-unit, meet some people who own a 4-unit. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, this isn't that hard. They do the same thing. And I think that's the key. And you just put it on your schedule and you go to every single one in the area. Even if it's not a good meetup or there's too many hard money lenders or something, What if you meet someone who can change the trajectory of your investing, let you come to their flips and look at it? It's a no-brainer for me.
I'm going to let Rye jump in. I'm not trying to hog this whole thing, but I was on a roll mentally here. And once I get in it, it's tough to get out. I just want to paint the picture for people. Cause like when they hear you speak, one, they can tell you that you've done a podcast for a long time. It's evident. Two, they can tell you that you've been in the real estate game a long time. You know what you're talking about. You can just feel it when you get in certain conversations. What does your real estate portfolio look like now, today? And then we can take some avenues back of how you got there, but just some social proof for people of like who Jonathan actually is and where you're at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, this is a great question because it's a great conversation, because I would say right now in my life, I probably have less doors. I 100% have less doors than I've ever had on purpose, because I've changed the way that I invest. But I never counted doors. And I think it's a very bad metric now. And I'll explain why. Because there's someone who tells you they have 100 doors. They never own 100% of those 100 doors. So if they own 50%, they have 50 doors, because I can do math. So a lot of times when you dial back how many doors somebody has, it's not actually the amount of doors. If you only own a door, if you own 100% of the door. So like I'm invested in syndications. I have like 400 units. I own like a point, like 1%. So I don't have 400 units and I don't claim to. So now over my life, I've owned hundreds of properties. I've flipped a lot of properties. I generally was a single family investor. My dad was a single family investor, but my dad was also an acquisition specialist. We used to go to courthouse steps auctions. So we own some weird properties. We own mini malls, commercial, just random stuff, industrial parks. So I've owned almost every type of asset in some form. But again, I was never like a high volume person. We did have a lot of properties in Westchester at one time, where we had our single one person owned property manager for all of our things, who was on salary. But eventually my sister wanted to get out of real estate. And during the pandemic, we sold off kind of most of the properties we still had in New York. But back in the day, we also did short-term rentals before Airbnb existed. It started off as my sister bought a new house, and she lived out in the Hamptons, and she was like, well, let's just try this. And on Verbo, she started doing it. And then we started getting houses in areas where her friends lived, so we could have a manager, but didn't have to pay like a manager percentage. And then we would use them. And that's still my short-term rental philosophy. So now my doors are way down, because I've been stockpiling money from selling everything and haven't really seen the deals that make sense to me. But what I'm looking forward to buying more is short-term rentals, investing in more syndications. And my favorite asset class is mixed use, Main Street, commercial properties by far.
I love it. So I want to talk about investing strategy and tactics. I have some questions for you to kind of build down from here, for just to frame it for people who are looking to invest in multiple markets. So I know you've tackled multiple markets, and you mentioned a bunch of different strategies you've tried. Let's start here. Like, how do you choose where to buy when you're like, how do you personally analyze a market and say, this is somewhere I want to dive into?
Yeah, to me, like real estate's local. I think that everyone should know that. It doesn't mean that like investing out of state is great, but the way that I invest out of state now is through syndication. So I don't have to do anything, and I don't even have to manage. I just get payments and win when it goes full cycle. So for new investors, that syndications may not be on their radar, but we may get to this part of the conversation where I actually think it's a viable opportunity for high earners who are still renting and don't want to buy a primary home in an era where, look, maybe you don't need to buy a primary home because I don't know where I'm going to be. But I choose a market based on how much I know about it. So the more that I know about a market means I can find deals. And I grew up being trained by an unbelievable deal finder. So the better I know a market, the way that I would tell anyone, and this is a great strategy, it's pretty simple. You make two lists. You make a list of all of the places that you've ever lived or gone to school. You put that on one side. So since you were a kid, every place that you ever lived for more than like a couple months, but even if a couple months. And then on the other side, you make a list of your friends and family, the ones that you like, not the annoying ones, the ones that you would trust. And then you look at where those people live and you see if there's any crossover with those, or if you have a market that you really like, because then you have a competitive advantage. Your competitive advantage is either you have local knowledge or you have boots on the ground. If you have one of those, you can conquer the market, because even if you want to go invest in Kansas, but your best friend lives in Kansas, look, now you guys are doing a partnership. Hey, this might be fun. So those are the two lists. I think it's a great way for investors to pick markets because look, not every, if you live in San Diego, you're not investing in San Diego unless you're, super rich. And it's silly to keep trying, like, looking and trying to find like a wholesale deal in San Diego. A wholesale deal is like $1 million, for a dump. So I think you have to, especially for people local, though, I would say I would always draw like a big circle and go 2 towns out from the town that I really like to be in, but I can't afford. And then I just go 2 towns out. I drive the towns and I see, look, which one's giving me a vibe like it's on the up and coming area. You always know it. I mean, look, you guys were in Philly. Philly's a classic example, harder because it's a city, but like you can see where the towns are breaking. They break one way and then they break another way. And you cannot invest in Philly if you don't understand block by block. And I think you can just widen that out for suburbia and still do really well.
I want to go back to something you said. I didn't know if I was going to jump in there. I want to go back to something that you said, Jonathan, about the unit count. And I'll touch on what you just said too. But I think it's ripe and it's extremely important. And it's something that Ryan and I think about a lot when we talk about our marketing. Ryan and I have 80 plus units. Do we own 100% of all these 80 plus units? No, we don't. But we're general partners in 60, 70 of these units, and meaning that we own a majority stake in them. We're not just like a passive investor. But I think it's really important for people to understand this, that the way that we've built our portfolio is, hey, I would rather own 20% of a 15 unit than 0% of 0, right? And Ryan and I grew to like 7, 8 units. We ran out of our own money. We're like, okay, like we're saving up, we're deploying, we're saving up, we're deploying. So if my advice to people is like, go buy your first 5 on your own, you should. And then maybe you've created a system where you can get off market deals and you can churn them out and you can continue that way. But our way of scaling was different and it's not right for everyone. It's not the way that, a lot of people say, I want to own 100% of this. And I completely sympathize with that. But for you, you're at a point, Jonathan, where it's like, all right, well, I've built up all the equity in these homes and these properties that I built. Now it actually makes sense for me to invest in syndications passively because the returns can be higher. You can actually maybe start to like functionally live off some of the cash flow when most people think I'm going to buy a duplex or a quad and I'm going to live off this cash flow in 5 years. And it's like, you're going to need a lot of them. So
especially
now. So how do you, if we were starting over 100% house hack, I would do it as long as I possibly can, over and over and over again. I don't care if it's a single family and you share rooms. I don't care if it's a quadplex and you live in one unit. You do that 4 or 5 times, you build up some cash flow. 8 years later, the $300 a month in cash flow is $1,000 a month or $900 or $800, whatever. I'm speaking fast because I'm like, this is just like, I appreciate when you say, if you look online, you see somebody that has 1,000 units. It's like, oh man, like that's, we know personally, the largest single family owner of real estate, like he owns all of these in Arizona and it's like 300 doors. So the privately held, that is. So it's like, if you say you own 1,000, it's like how, it's all a marketing thing. So I think it's very interesting.
No, well, think about it this way. Look, you guys are transparent about it. That's what's important. My point is not that the doors don't matter. It's that people will discount. Like if I counted up my doors right now, people, oh shit, he doesn't own a lot. Oh, great. You're not going to listen to me. I've been doing this for 50 years. You know what I mean? What I know is the reason I don't have a lot of doors because I don't want to be an active investor anymore. Yep. First of all, I can't find any flips. There's single family home buyers, bidding on junk houses that I used to buy. So it doesn't make sense. I can't outbeat them. So it's really about, hey, can we make real estate more transparent for people, especially for new people? Because there's a ton of shiny objects out there and they could choose the wrong one. And those people will sell them on a pipe dream. So it's more important to say exactly what you said. Hey, we got to this because we started to use other people's money and now we have partnerships, and partnerships you have to watch out for too. It's just about preparing people. I know you guys well enough from watching your content and from having you on my podcast that you are transparent about. And I think that's what's important because there's just a lot of, the showiness part that's out there where it's like, look, everybody doesn't want to drive a Lambo. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what the car of your dreams, like get a Lambo. But like, if it's not, if your Lambo's leased and you're pretending that it's not, those are just different things. It's just different things.
Dude, that is my dream car. So
no, I know. But see, I drive my dream car, and I'm not like a car fanatic. I just wanted this car, so I got it. My dad liked houses and cars. Everything else, the cheapest guy of all time. Everybody knows it. And I'm not exactly the same way, but also no one would know that I own real estate or anything. I just do my thing on my own, other than, I have a podcast, but I would rather just be like Millionaire Next Door type of thing and just relax.
My dad's the same way. And I kept telling him when I was a kid, I was really wanting that. He's like, dude, why? I was like, dude, I just have to have it. I don't know. Like, it's just my thing. Like you handed me these Batman toys as a freaking 5-year-old and you expect me not to want my Batmobile? Like, I'm obsessed with it. So there it is. But no, he's the same way as you. Has a bunch of real estate, construction company, pays everything in cash. I'm like, I just know he's doing well, right? But he acts like he's not. He always has a truck. I think I read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, to your example. I think the average millionaire was driving a F-150, and everybody thinks it's a sports car, and that's just really a marketing play for a lot of people. But my point in bringing all this up, actually, a couple of things that you mentioned, which I thought was cool. You mentioned video games. You mentioned collecting cards. Like this is, I'm into all of that stuff. So I think you and I align on the back end on a lot of stuff too, and it makes it fun in these conversations. I'm like, everybody's got their own thing that makes them unique, but somehow that real estate weaves itself back into the fold. One thing you touched on in the beginning that I want to just make sure we don't gloss over before we go, you kind of a little bit further into strategies. You mentioned that at some point, syndications actually are viable for newbie investors or people in the beginning of their journey. Can you talk to that? Because I think a lot of people think, hey, you need to have 10, 15 doors of yourself or 50-50 with a partner before you even think of coming in passively. Maybe can you explain that to who it might be the right fit for?
Yeah, well, let's set the stage though. So for syndications, generally, you need to be an accredited investor. So you're usually going to have about $1 million net worth or higher, and you're going to need about 50 grand to get into a deal. If you don't have that, there's a lot of group opportunities to fund together to go into syndications. But the reason why I think syndications are going to become more popular is because people are realizing that it's not that easy to just flip a house in Indianapolis when you live in Wyoming. And the people that you trust often don't work out. And it's also not great to just own one property in Indianapolis. So when I look at a syndication, I am in 3 multifamily syndications. One's in Madison, Wisconsin, one's in DFW, and one's in Chicago. I like those markets, but I don't want to buy a one-off in those markets and have one property manager. So now I have exposure to 50 units, around 50 units in Madison and in Chicago, and 256 in Dallas. So I'm kind of participating in the market. But when you're in a syndication, you have to realize that it's completely illiquid. You can't get the money back. So that's the big difference. But at my age, and I do think people with high earners in the beginning might think about this for this reason, I'm doing it on purpose. I don't want to mess around with the money. I want to tell myself, no, don't try to get 2 house flips because there's no good deals. So trust an operator who all they do is multifamily. They know how to operations, they know how to get good loans. I'm looking at the debt hard to make sure that's good. So for me, it's kind of a hedge against my own control. And that's what I've learned over time, that the more I give up control to people who are better at things than me, which is hard for people with any ego, because they're like, oh, I think I'm great at everything. I'm not. All they do is multifamily, and I don't want to be a landlord. So why can't I invest in multifamily without sweating it out and getting a call on the weekend that somebody's boiler's broken?
That was our exact thought of why. Now, we came in originally as a limited partner, and then it graduated to the general partner. But that was our exact thought. Ryan and I were working our full-time jobs. And we're like after work analyzing deals. And I'm like, dude, we're getting beat out by people that do this full time. Like they're crushing us. They're getting better deals. They know the markets. They do this for a living. So it's like, we got to that 7 to 8 units, and it was like, maybe if we can't beat them, join them kind of thing. Right. So it took us 2 years really to find the right person to partner with. And then our brand started to grow. And so there was synergy there, but I couldn't agree more. There's people that have come into our community who are looking to get their first or next deal, and the first deal they've done is a syndication deal with us, and it's a 506B, so we're allowed to have friends and family and people that you've created relationships with. But it's like, it's interesting because they're like, wow, great! Like I learned the fundamentals from you guys so that I can know, like, and trust, and then I can verify the information that you're telling me, and then I also can be passive and be hands off. Yeah. The problem that I see with it, Jonathan, is that we were on a webinar the other day for one of our deals that's closed out. Or we closed on it. It's in the operations phase.
Yeah.
And somebody was looking at the deal and they're like, I don't want to go for this 17% IRR and have cash flow trickle in, and because they were going to invest 50K. I actually found this deal online that I saw on Instagram that was a 37% IRR, and I was like, oh man, like I hope that deal works out for you. Like I really do, genuinely, because they're
37% IRR.
It was something like maybe it was 31, right? But it was in the 30s, and I was just like, man, it's easy to be sold a dream these days. So
Yeah.
My question for you is, how did you find those operators? I'm not suggesting people have to come invest with us. We try to do one a quarter. We didn't do any in 2024. We're off to that one a quarter pace in 2025. So we sometimes have deals come up, but maybe for people that are listening that want to go vet, hey, I do have a high income. I want to get in the real estate game on the active side, but I think passive would be a great way for me to do it too. How do you find the people that you really do know, like, and trust, even if you're not in their markets, because you're in Jersey?
Yeah. Lucky for me, I had a podcast. I mean, I really didn't know that much about syndications. And then I started getting on people who I knew of, and I knew they were in syndications, but I was like, whoa, this is starting to open my eyes. So the 3 syndications are all with people I had on the podcast. That's how I met them first. But for somebody who's a novice, there's not a ton of sites out where you can vet syndications. Bigger Pockets opened Passive Pockets, which took over for Left Field Investors. That's a very good portal. I had both Jim and Paul, the co-hosts of that podcast, on my show. And I really like it. I really think they're people, they rate the syndicators in there. You talk operators. But if you want to learn about syndications, you just read The Hands-Off Investor by Brian Burke. I mean, he's an absolute legend. He's very calm, and he hasn't been buying anything the last couple of years. He's been involved in debt. But that book will explain to you how to invest in syndications. And actually, it's operator first, and then you go through. But it goes through all the financials, and you'll really know what you're looking at. Because if you just say, hey, send me the pro forma, PDF on the syndication, you're just going to be like gibberish to you. What these 5 and 10 year projections, it's just a bunch of numbers. So that book, I think, is the key to starting to understand it, because I think a lot of people with disposable money, they get hopped up and they just trust, as you're saying, I just trust the first person or the highest spread. Just literally burn your money. Burn your money. If anyone said to me, I found a 37% deal on Instagram, I would just immediately block them and never talk to them again. Because I don't want to even be associated with that. Someone later saying, no, I went between your 2 deals. Like, don't put any of that near me. Like, as you were saying, you're just looking for a pipe dream. And if you're looking for a pipe dream, you're going to end up in the pipe. No dream.
100%. Dude, at that point, just drop it all into Bitcoin and just let it ride.
Yeah, just put it in index funds. Like, stop being crazy. I have lots of money in index funds. I love index funds, but it's balanced money that I don't need, same as syndications.
Yep, 100%. So I have a question for you. As we kind of touched on this in the beginning of the show, a lot of people that listen, or a big chunk, are aspiring investors. So you already mentioned this, like, first step, you need to find a mentor, obviously, or people that are doing what you want to do, get into the local meetups. After that, what's the next step for you? I know we have deal analysis, going to find deals, but I'm trying to give a semi walkthrough from your perspective, not ours, on what a beginning investor can do if they do want to just get their first single family or their house hack or duplex, like that first deal. Really walk us through that.
Yeah, it starts at that meetup. And I wouldn't even say mentor. I would just say friends, because I think people have been convinced that they need a mentor too quickly. And then everyone's asking you to get coffee for 15 minutes. And I'd rather, put a nail gun into my, waist than just do that. I don't want to do that. It's not a good use of my time. I don't know who that person is. So I think, like, you have to build friendships there. And that means you have to show up consistently. So you're very reliable, because if you're reliable at the meetups, then that person who has 2 flips going, and this is where I'm going with it. If you say, hey, is it cool if I just swing by one of your flips and hang out for a day? I'll do some work, whatever you want, if the liability is okay. I would try to go to what they have. Hey, if you're going to, if you still pick up checks, or you're going to check on your 8 unit, can I just go with you one time? But you can't ask before you've built up a relationship and a friendship, because then that's really it. Because you want to see it first. You guys know, why do people get cold feet? Because they've never done it before, and most of the time their agent doesn't prepare them for the process. So they finally win. They've put out like 20 offers. They've never been close because they're a low baller. Then they finally win, and now they think something's wrong with the deal. Oh, come on, babies. Didn't you prepare for this? Like, stop being such a wussy. Like, just you're doing the thing, but it's because they don't know other people to say, yeah, you're going to crap your pants when you win. but
Yeah.
that's why you're doing this. So relax. So I think that's it. You start to try to do things together with other investors. So it helps when you know someone with a real estate license who's an agent, even if they don't do a ton of business, because then you can just go, you can say like, hey, every Saturday morning, let's go look at all the vacant dumps on the property together. Yes, it's literally the most fun I've ever had. That's how I grew up with my dad. And a lot of my best friends and I would just like look at every single dump on the market. We still do. Like, why not? It's fun.
So I think, first of all, I love the way that you just articulate things. I can tell that you're kind of a mentor, speaker, coach.
Some people don't want my mentorship. I can assure you that.
That's okay. We want it today. So thank you for sharing it. I think one of the questions that came to my mind, just as you were talking, is like, you mentioned you've been doing this for 50 years. Ryan and I have been doing it for 7 years. So it's a lot less. It's 1/8 the time if you're doing math, or 1/7 the time. So what I'm getting at is it harder to invest in real estate today than it was back when you started, or is it just different? And I'm not necessarily looking to myth bust, because the answer could be yes, but is it harder, or is it just different?
I think I'm going to say it's different. And the reason why I think technology makes it harder and easier. Like you guys were saying before, there's pros and cons to it. Sure. Now I can see all the on-market properties on Zillow, but also I can see all the properties. So I don't really have a competitive advantage for on-market properties. When I grew up, the MLS was just a book. So you couldn't see pictures. You had to drive by everything. There was no way to know. So you weren't getting, 12 offers on a house. No one was even looking. They had to go to a real estate agent's office, look through the book. They'd only have one picture. They would have to go drive it. So the way of doing it is different. But that's why I go back to something we said at the beginning. Look, you can use technology, to build lists, something like PropStream or Deal Machine. But the way people fail is they build these big lists that everybody builds, and then they don't go through the list. I'm a micro marketer. So if I get a big list, this will be good for your people. So if you want to build a list, I like absentee owners, and I'll explain why. They don't live in the area. So I want every out-of-state owner. So just say you build your traditional list, 20 years owned, 80% equity or more, something that everyone does. And that's fine. You get that list. You should be driving part of that list to see which ones look dumpier than others. But then the way that you stack the list is you have to look and see where each person lives. And people don't want to do that because they're lazy and they think technology is going to do it all for themselves. So if you build that list, and then if I'm in New Jersey, so I would stack the list and start with the people who live the farthest away and only own one property in my state. Why? Because why the hell do you want a property in New Jersey if you live in California? So I'm going to have a much higher conversion conversation percentage because I'm being smarter about who I'm calling on the list instead of just cold calling everyone on the list and then realizing, whoa, cold calling sucks. It's like getting punched in the face 100 times a day. No wonder I stopped. If you stack the list the opposite way and focus on just one property farthest away, your conversion percentage is going to go up dramatically.
I love that answer. And it made me think about, I don't think being trained the way I was by the 2000s that I could survive back when you were growing up. And here's the reason why. We live in an ADD, spontaneous response time world where it's like, if Ryan, my best friend in the whole world, doesn't answer my text in 37 minutes, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Like, how is he not seeing? You know what I mean? And that's a personality problem. But I'm saying, like, that's the way it is now. Now you're saying back when you were growing up, you had to drive to the office. Then you had to wait to see if they were there. What if they weren't there? Then you had to make an offer. You had to mail it in, or you were whatever. Obviously there were phones, but I'm just saying, like, it takes. There were
pay phones.
Yeah.
Well, let me interrupt you for 1 sec because I want to explain what we really did, because this will be shocking, because you can still do this. It's a little dicier now because people don't want you to knock on their doors. Like, I've never answered my door. That's ludicrous. But we would, every single time we would be driving, no matter what city we were in, if my dad saw a property that was a dump that you would identify, that now AI can identify as, broken windows, roof, we would pull over and he would knock on the door. Like thousands of times as a kid, I'm like, we're on vacation in Sanibel. Would you relax? I could get a deal. And he would get a deal. You're just buying random properties. Like, how did you get a strip mall in Sebring? Well, the lights were all falling off. So I tracked, figured out, went to the county clerk, tracked down the owner. He was just meticulous. You can still do all that. But to your point, the technology is part of the shiny object that creates analysis paralysis. You think you're doing all this work. Well, I mailed 1,000 postcards. Yeah, but you mailed postcards that said you'll buy quick for cash. You don't even have cash. So you're just lying. Like everything's a marketing funnel that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, I think the point where I was going with it is it's more so like the expectation of time frame of the return on your investment. So you're or like the time frame of how quickly things are going to get done. So you're like, oh, like I mailed 50. Alex Ramosi said this the other day. He goes, he was starting a business and he said I think it was I don't know if it was a car wash or something like that. And he's like, I sent out 300 flyers. And he told the guy, he's like, I didn't get any deals. And he's like, well, we did 300,000 flyers this past month. So I think your sample size is too small. So I say that to even tell myself, like, look, if you analyze 10 deals and you make offer on 2 and you don't get them and you're worried that you're not doing something right or you're far behind, it's like, no, you just haven't done it long enough to even see the potential results that you could find. Again, I'm not preaching. I'm saying it's like, I need to even hear myself say this sometimes because we're building a business and it isn't where I need it to be yet. And I'm like, I've been doing it for 8 months. Like, what am I saying? So I think that's the challenge with the instantaneous world of 2025 versus when I kind of say tongue in cheek that I couldn't survive back then, but it's a very different mindset of like things take longer and you think they take a shorter amount of time. And that's, I think where, I don't know if you have an opinion on it, but that's where I think the biggest challenge lies, really.
Well, look, everybody's obsessed with vanity metrics. If I can sneak a deal on one handwritten letter, I'm not going to tell everyone I'm 100% converter. I'm just doing what I want to do to get properties. But other people, my conversion percentage is, 4.3%. Really? How do you know when someone looks at your postcard? You don't have any idea. You can only count the calls, but maybe if you mailed 8 postcards, because traditionally postcards take 8 months to have any reaction from the studies. So 8 months. On the 8th month, you may get the call. It's like if you're consistent at social media, people will just buy followers and say, look, I have 25,000 followers. Cool. No one's transacting with you. So that doesn't make any difference to me. But if you're just consistent, like I am, after a year, someone just DMs me, on Instagram and says, hey, I want to buy $1 million house. I'm like, oh shit, this is actually a real person. I've been watching your content for a year because I'm just consistent. And I think that's how I think about marketing. If you wanted to do the list of 300, I wouldn't say do 300,000. I just do 8 months on the 300. Your return will be better, and you don't have as much money to spend that way.
Ryan and I were talking about this morning, and I'll let him chime in obviously here too. But we were talking about how you can kind of tell who's faking it on social, and it's interesting because we can tell. But I don't think everyone can. Or else why would someone do that? Why would you buy 100,000 followers? If everyone knew, then it wouldn't work. So it doesn't, but it's an interesting thing to me because I know a lot of people that have done it and I will never, ever call out any names because I respect everyone for running the business the way that they want to do it as long as they're not hurting anybody. But I just think it's like, the way I look at it is like, it's going to come out in the wash eventually, like sure. People are going to know, people are going to see so for us, it's taken us 5 years. By the time this episode comes out, we'll probably be just at 40,000 followers on Instagram and, the X amount of downloads per month, but it's taken us 5 years and it feels like we're sludging through the mud because I've watched some people organically rise to 400,000 followers, but I've also watched some people just buy 300,000 followers. And I think, man, sometimes I think, is that the way to go? And then I just constantly remind myself that it's
hard.
Your reputation is really what precedes you. And is the most important thing. That's what I
think of it this way though. I've been on Instagram since it started, like 2010. I still have 3,000 followers and I could give 2 shits.
Yeah.
I get a crap ton of business through Instagram and through my YouTube channel, and same YouTube channel has I don't know, 1.3 thousand followers, viewers, whatever. Cause I don't care, but that's me. I'm not trying to grow a brand. I respect what you guys are doing because it builds the whole cycle, but it's not me. I'm old. I just put out content. I don't hire companies to do anything for me because I just don't give a shit. I just want to put out content, talk on podcasts, have my podcast, and help people somewhere invest in real estate. And because of that, I believe in the karmic properties that this stuff will come back to me. Because for me personally, I'm an introvert, and I really I don't answer my phone. So for me, more followers just mean more problems for me, more calls and more bullshit DMs. I already get, 10,000 texts a day. I just got one while we're on. It's another one that just says, hey, is this Jonathan? Like, do you guys really think this works? Like, I mean, come on, or something. It's just like, that's modern marketing though. And that's the trap of technology.
Yeah, there's so many things to unpack there, man. First off, I think you actually attract more people when you don't need it. And you probably understand that. But like the fact that you're not paying a marketing agency to go do this stuff, like anytime someone talks to you in a DM or DMs you, they're getting you. They're not getting a ManyChat robot. They're not getting an appointment setter. They're getting Jonathan, right? And like when you have time for it. And so I just think there's something to that where it's more authentic in a certain type of way. And like some of these, it's just a lot of people are striving for the vanity numbers that we mentioned again. But I think we mentioned old school and new school, and I'll just kind of compare ourselves. I think we have a lot to learn from you. And obviously, like vice versa, age wise on investor, probably the other side, like there's things to technology. But one thing that you touched on is like competitive advantage. And for me, Corey asked the question is like, is it harder or is it just different now? And I love the story and just like the unpacking of, dude, you guys didn't even have, you're talking way back. You didn't have the internet. Like there's no,
I'm old.
Imagine. I'm like, damn, not being able to see the property and to go do it. You have just a skill set and a wherewithal in you that like 99% of investors today will not go do. They're not going to drive a property. They're not going to go build the relationships that you mentioned. So that competitive advantage is something I want to highlight to people that are listening. Like if you can be different from the 99% of people that are just waiting for the deal spoon fed to them or handed on a silver platter, you're going to separate yourselves. You also said to go to the in-person meetups. People are like, nah, I don't have time. I'm just going to sit on Zoom, or maybe I'll wait for a webinar.
They're watching like, Handmaid's Tale, which is a great show, by the way, but like everyone has time to go to a meetup. And I'm an introvert. I host my own meetup, so I don't have to go to other people's, but like
100%. And I think I just wanted to bring that up because I love this. We're able to go back and forth between the different eras of investing, and it's all hard. It doesn't matter when you're doing it, and there's different challenges, and the market's competitive, and so it's just super interesting. Kind of the back and forth here. I have one more for you. Yeah. You've seen a pattern over the years of people that have wanted to become investors, that have become investors, and then have become successful. Can you maybe talk to some patterns that you see from the people who succeeded versus those who stay stuck and stay small?
Yeah, organized and cooperative. Competitiveness will ruin you in this business. Everybody knows everybody, no matter what they think. You just may not know them yet. It's not even a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon in real estate investing. You can maybe get like 2 degrees if you're lucky. So consistency, cooperation, I think, is the best. Look, I was a trial attorney for 8 years, really 10 years. So I'm a hardcore negotiator, but I kind of had to learn when I started to go out, like when I'm in real estate, I can't negotiate like I did on a murder case. There's no victims. So I had to relax a little bit, especially when I became an agent. I was like too hopped up all the time, because I like the fight. But now in real estate, I figured out, like, because I went back and thought about, every time we knocked on a door, my dad was just like, hey, how you doing? We were just happening to driving by. I really like your house. He was just building relationships. Everybody loved my dad. And I've started to take that into my real estate, where if you're just cooperative, like, hey, this deal's not for me. Do you guys want this deal? You want to know those people, because when you know those people, that's where you find partners, and that's where you find trust. And without trust, you have nothing. You have social media, which again, you can find people over time that you trust, but you better watch them for a long time to see if they back it up. The people that we were talking about before, the ones who are fake, you're not going to hear them as a guest on podcasts a lot, because they can't even run an hour of stuff out of their mouth, and they can't field questions. They're like, we were joking around, they'll send you like a question list. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I don't need a question list. I ask what I want when I want. That's how it goes.
That's so interesting, man. This is one of my favorite conversations we've had in a long time. But you touch on, we're just so aligned, even though we are, like I said, in different investing eras here. But the abundance mindset is something that rings true with us too. And we just like being around good people. You also highlighted relationships. And I think we all know life is about relationships, whether you're building a brand, whether you're running a business, whether you're just going to your job, like it's all about who you know. And then when you are given an opportunity, or you need to realize it's an opportunity, and then push through and take action. Right. And that's what separates people. But, kind of as we go through this, I'm looking for people. We always say, hey, you need to build relationships. You need to get your circle bigger. You need to be, or not bigger, but get in bigger rooms or better rooms, or around the people that are doing what you want to do. Can you talk to maybe tips and tricks that you've seen over the years on how to become a better relationship builder and how to foster and nurture those relationships?
Yeah, I do not remember who told me this, but I always use it and I can't credit them. But it's be interested, not interesting. If you're the life of the party, then everyone's listening to you. What do other real estate investors like to do? They like to talk about themselves. So shut up and listen and ask good questions. But in order to ask good questions, you have to be prepared to ask good questions. And that's why you listen to podcasts and read books before you show up at the meetups, because then the meetups will get you to take action. It's the same thing as the difference of saying like, hey, can I take you to coffee for 15 minutes? Why? I want to learn how to be a real estate investor. Well, I can't teach you how to be a real estate investor, and I can make coffee. I mean, I don't drink coffee, but like that's the difference. And that's also kind of like a way for newer people to think like, okay, let me not do what everybody else does. Let me actually ask a really good question. So if I knew that someone I was really interested in becoming was going to be at a meetup or at an event, I would do all the research on them so I knew everything. And if I got one chance to ask them a question, it'd be the best fucking question they've ever heard. And I guarantee you, they will give you their information, because all they hear all day is stupid questions. How do I become a real estate investor? How long do you have? I don't even know how much money you have, what your will is, if you're even a poser or not. So if you do the research on somebody, you really know. Like I really like Cody Sanchez. I think she's not BS. I love the book Main Street Millionaire. She spoke at BPCon. I have my questions ready. I didn't bump into her, and I'm like well versed into BP, but they like ushered her out really quick. She was a keynote in Cancun last year. But like I know because I've read. Like I read the book. I'm ready for these people, and I think that would be a really good way for it. Even if you read a book on flipping houses, or you read the Burr book, then at least when you go to the meetup, you can ask a really pointed question for somebody who's done a Burr. Read the house hacking book, then meet a house hacker. Now you have a great question. Hey, I read in this book, this is what happened. Is that what it's like in real life? That's a great question, and someone will answer that.
I think being different and not trying to fit in and be the norm is really like a separating factor. And that is kind of what you just alluded to. Is
memorable.
Like, yeah. Like, okay, how am I going to approach this person? And they're going to be like, wow, this is something that normally people don't go this route. I'm not saying to look up their family tree and scare the shit out of them. I'm just saying like figure out a way to get in front of somebody that actually makes sense.
I have to tell you this before I forget, because that's what you're saying also applies to off-market acquisition. So I'll tell you something that's really important. A lot of times for people who are new to off-market acquisition, you get a lot of what we call FU responses, where they're like, how'd you get my information? So what I do is the same thing, because I can get anybody's information because I have access to the internet. I'm not stalking you. So I say, I found it online. Just, I have your phone number. I'll text it to you. And then I just screenshot it and send it to them. The website, I just send them the link. Like, I'm not stalking you. And you can do that in person. Real people, like, who are public and they know their information's out there, I'd much rather have somebody ask me a question like, look, you guys have a podcast, I do. How many dumb emails do you get pitching you a guest? And they're like, hey, I really like Wealth Juice. Just listen to the episode, with Jonathan Greene when he said, and they just quote something that's in the show notes. Like, you didn't listen to the episode. But what if they said a really poignant question based on the episode or based on your background? You would immediately be in a conversation with them. It's a no-brainer.
One of the things that we've been getting recently is I want to pitch you a guest on your show, Untitled. I'm like, you couldn't even like switch out the name.
Well,
or
do you get Dear Wealth Juice? I get Dear Zen in the Art of Real Estate. I'm like, could you just swap it out, put up my name? Like, we're people here. Come on.
Or the best one that we get is we have a hyphen or like a bar that says Wealth Juice Personal Finance. They say the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just
good copy and pasting.
Yeah, it's so obviously those get deleted right away, but I have had people that reach out. Maybe it's not actually them, but they portray themselves to be this actual person, and then they give you real factual or like, hey, I actually want to connect you guys with this person because you said this on the show. And I'm like, all right, well, let's have a conversation. I forget how we got in touch. I think it was an Instagram DM, but
but I didn't see it for a while because I don't look that much. And then when I go through my Instagram DMs, because like Ryan was saying, it's actually me, no one's doing it. I was like, wait, these guys look cool. And then I was like, oh, wait, I know them. Like, I've heard of this. Let me look through it. And then when I read your DM, it was also like, this is a nice DM. It's actually from a real person. It's not like, hey, do you want me to do your SEO? Like, 37 of those a morning.
I hate that, dude. The YouTube ones we get.
It's 20 to 30 a day on every platform, every DM. It's unbelievable.
Glad we're not the only ones.
Yeah.
No, it's so fun. There's an art to this whole thing. And you talked about this earlier in the episode, but like this game industry is so small. It is the way less than maybe like the 1 degree of Kevin Bacon, if you will. But which I do like. I will say you do an amazing job with this. I just want to point this out to people, especially for your podcast, Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. You have a guest list, or it's almost like a guest directory, and it has everything so concisely organized. And you can learn about everybody. I just think it's brilliant for people to go through to see who good guests are for their upcoming shows. But wanted to give you a shout out on that. And then another thing on to get on people's shows, like if you're listening to one of these PR people, just leave a review. If someone's like, hey, love your show, not blanketed across like cookie cutter, be like, hey, left you a 5-star review. This is what I like about it. I'm way more likely to look at that and be like, okay, I'm going to give you a shot. And be like, you didn't have to go out. They screenshot it. They send it to you.
Yeah.
They're way more ahead. They've already given me value. Right. It's once again, like if you need a video editor and they send you 5 samples, you're probably going to go with that person versus the one that's check a look at my website. You know what I mean?
I always say, just be a human. People have, they're using technology to replace them. And this comes from an introvert. I can only be a human because I just don't have time for all of the BS. But it's like, you can tell the difference. If you can't, you should learn how to tell the difference because you're taking pitches on stuff and again, my time is the most valuable thing. I've been on time freedom for a long time. That's what most of your listeners are chasing at some point. Not financial freedom, because that's different for everyone. It's the freedom to do what you want when you want. And to do that, you need to have as much money as you can. But if you live in Indiana, it's different than if you live in LA on how much you need. But I think being a human is, hey, look, I want to really get on Tim Ferriss and Rich Roll, but I'm not ready yet. But I know what I'm going to put in the email, and I know they're going to read it because it's not what everybody else puts. It's not a cookie cutter. It's actually, hey, I've been listening, things like I've been listening to podcasts for a long time. Like if someone sent to you, they said, I've been listening to podcasts, everybody says that. But if they really tell you some moments, like we were saying, and bring something up, that's why I think doing your research is so important just on real estate before you show up at a meetup. Because everyone's going to ask you, hey, what do you invest in? Nothing yet, but I'm really looking to be a house hacker. Are there any house hackers here? If you're at my meetup, I'm going to say, yeah, those 2 people, they house hack. That person has house hacked 3 times. Connector, you're off to the races, man. That's all you need. So like everyone listening, just get to real estate investing meetups. And if you think there's not one near you, there is. And if there's not, just start one. And so many people will show up because they're just thinking like you are, damn, I wish there was a real estate investing meetup. You don't have to be a full-time real estate investor to start a meetup. Just start a meetup.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I have one last one. Corey, you got one?
We both do. Go ahead.
Mine will be real quick, but we're on the topic of podcasts, right? So I want to just let people know you're the host of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. Great podcast.
Thanks.
2 questions for you.
Yeah.
First one is, why did you start this podcast? What's the point of it and what are you hoping to accomplish? And then can you talk to what Zen means in the context of investing?
Yeah. So, I mean, the podcast is really an homage to my dad and everything that he taught me, but it was kind of like a lot of people call a pandemic baby. We had started doing online real estate investing meetups during the pandemic. And I was like, I had done, this is my 4th podcast. I had done 2 podcasts before. One was called Dad. One was called Assemblage, was creative podcast. So I had experience and I was those were good, but I shut them down because it wasn't like, no scale to it. And then I started Zen and I started this agent podcast at the same time. But then the investing one blew up. So I just ditched the agent podcast, but it's about the mindful approach to real estate investing, which if they've been listening to this whole episode, you get like, I say whatever I want, but the way that I approach real estate is in a more mindful way than what's going on now. And it's because I spent all that time driving for dollars and appreciating houses. I love houses. If you don't like houses, you shouldn't be in real estate, or like you can be in yield investing, but then you should invest in syndications. But you're not going to be a good flipper if you don't like houses. You're just going to make cookie cutter crap that maybe it sells okay, but you're not scaling as much as you can. So to me, it's like a way to pay back everything that my dad taught my sister and I, and to just kind of push it forward. And also to have a voice that has nothing behind it. Like I don't have advertisers. It's all independently produced. I have a company that produces it, but I do everything else. I do all the posts. I like the control, and I just feel like, and I got a trademark, so like no one can get it now. But it's, to me, and I think I told this when you guys were on, I honestly just love talking real estate. I mean, and hopefully it comes across, but every conversation that I have on my podcast, and I'm sure it's the same for you, I learn like 5 new things. I'm like, Jesus, Like that's how I got invested in syndications. And then, but the hard part is, you do a land flipping show or like a mobile home park. And now I'm like, oh, well, here comes something else that I want to do. Like, how can I do all this stuff? And it's just really cool to see so many people succeeding. And the fact that we can have this conversation and someone could just be listening somewhere is just unbelievable, because they could get one piece of information. It could change everything of every way that they've thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more, man. I think some advice from based on what you said, what I would tell people is get really good at one thing, because there's always going to be FOMO out there, and there's always going to be people that are creating revenue and building a legacy in their own way. And the grass is always greener until you smell. It's another Hermosi thing. The grass is always greener until you get on the other side, and that you smell the fertilizer or the shit that's in that grass. So you can make money.
That grass grows.
Yeah, right. But you can make money in a billion different ways. And I think getting really good at one thing, honing in on it, because like you said, we had somebody on the other day who in the last year, they got their land flipping business to over $1 million in profit. And they made $300,000 off one deal or $400,000 off one deal. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. But we're in our lane. Stay in our lane. Of course, you can make money in a million different ways. So if you're in the beginning stages, now that leads me to my last question.
Yeah.
If you're starting out, I'll give you a scenario, because you kind of said like, well, I don't know anything about you. Not me. This is not me, because we're further along. But I have $75,000 saved up. I'm making $135,000 a year at my job. I want to get into real estate investing. I live in New Jersey. I'm trying to give you some more context. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Live in New Jersey is tough, man.
Yeah. Okay. Or PA, or, in tri-state area. What would you recommend that fictitious person that I made up, that is a lot of people, do if they want to get started with that type of money, that type of income, and that scenario?
New Jersey is tough, man. I mean, I'm in Morris County, but northern New Jersey is tough. And I have investors that come to me all the time. And I just don't see the metrics for them. I would house hack the crap out of anything that I could find. I just think it's really hard. But I think your best bet in northern New Jersey, and really in any area, like you were saying before, is house hack if you can. But also, look, if you have a partner or a family, discuss it first. Not everybody wants to house hack. If you're a single person, house hack as long as you can. If you're a couple who are on the journey together, house hack, live in the basement, get what I call a 2+1. 2+1 is the best thing out there. A legal 2-family with a bonus unit. And as an owner, in every place you can live in the bonus unit. Sometimes you can't have a stove. Like, this is how you make money. Or room hack, room hack when you're in college, get your parents to get your place and room hack. So that person, I would say, only look for house hacks. And P.S., the one thing that we didn't talk about, though, that I think is so important about house hacking, it's not just a financial vehicle, but you learn how to be a landlord. So then when you leave and you're just at apartments, you already have landlord experience, because most people find out landlording is not really for me. I don't like it. Anyone who's going into a house hack and they think, oh, I wonder how I can make the tenant next door not know that I'm the owner, is missing the point. If you're going to be a good landlord, you're going to know the owners, and you have to treat them and understand that, hey, that's a caretaker of one of the biggest asset that I've ever owned. I better be a good landlord and know the people. And that's what I learned walking those properties and picking up checks from like 2 to 18 and then doing rent collections in college for my dad.
That was a great answer. Completely last question for me. I figure just being at where you are in your journey, this is going to be useful. Let's say that you could go back to your 18-year-old self and give him advice. It doesn't have to be necessarily business or real estate. It could be life. Knowing what you know now, all the things you've seen, the journey that you've traveled down, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self? Ask
more questions. Like my mom died when I was 20. My dad died when I was 33. So when my mom died, I realized I better ask my dad everything about his life, or I'm not going to know anything. So I had 13 years to ask questions. But this goes to business, investing. A lot of us sit around on our computers, putting it into ChatGPT. Look, ChatGPT is awesome. I'm actually really impressed with how quickly it's going. But you're going to get a much better answer from a human when you want to learn about something investing related. So I would go back to what we were saying about doing your research. Ask more questions, but ask better questions. Stop asking such softball questions. If you ask better questions, you're going to get better answers and way better connections. I found that ChatGPT, I think Rye likes it a little bit more than me. I do really like it. What I've found is that
it's just creating a new baseline and a new standard for where people live their lives, right? So like, that's all it's doing. It's bringing you up. If you don't use it, you're behind. But if you use it, you're just creating this new standard. And if you turn off your brain and you stop thinking, then you just become the new median. And I think what ends up happening is that people, the information is abundant. It's anywhere. You can find all this information. Everything that we're talking about, you can find on podcasts, you can find on the internet, you can find on ChatGPT. The implementation is what's missing.
Yeah.
And the people to go along the journey with you to push you through the mental state of where you need to get in and out of in order to actually advance yourself. That's what's missing. And that's what I'm like, that's why the relationships and the talking to people and having people look over your shoulder and say, no, Corey, you're an idiot. Don't do that. Yes, Ryan, do that. He's smarter than you. You should have listened to him. Whatever it is, like just I think that if you can put yourself in rooms with people who have done what you're looking to do, I've said it time and time again, but it's just it's going to beat AI in different ways, not from an information, but from just from an implementation standpoint.
Well, one thing before Ryan hits me with that, if there's a last question, look, the thing is in nuance. Again, this comes from an introvert who would rather hide in the house all the time. Everything that I've said here, if you just got it off of ChatGPT, you would just read it. It has no anything. And because I'm a monotone person, except when I'm on podcasts, like when I'm texting, it's different because people read it how they want to read it. And that's how you read ChatGPT. It could be great information, but it doesn't have any heart. So if you're asking me and you can hear us like excitable and hear the nuance and how I talk about it, it's like a Chris Voss thing. You know, when he goes through and Never Split the Difference, how he used to do hostage negotiations, he uses a late night DJ voice and that calms him down. And that's all part of negotiation. But knowing the excitement of other people and hearing us like get, amped up is much different than if somebody just read a transcript of this whole show. They would get information, but they wouldn't get the vibe and the feeling of what we really think about real estate investing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I actually trying to soak all this in too, because I like, going along this journey with you. And it's, you guys keep making me think the whole underlying tone throughout this episode is based on relationships and actually going and doing the thing and taking action versus studying all the time. And it's just such an interesting thing. I think adding partnerships in is another like woven thing for within relationships. Again, I'm thinking like I could do all of this myself. It would be slower. I'm having way more fun with Corey. We split the risk. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like I think I probably would have stopped year 2.5 in because I'm like, this was cool, but like it wasn't as fun. So I want to weave that into like there's something about meeting people at the meetups and going and taking things down together and having that person or people, the tribe that you can relate to and you can talk about the bigger life, right? And attack bigger things. And that's why we have the podcast. Like having you on, man, it's like I can see my future and like you're still giving back.
Yeah, we do have the same color beard, even though mine's whiter. So you really are seeing the future.
There you go. I love it. And just even having your experience in having been an attorney too, and the way you think and just, I don't know, there's a lot of different things here, but I am genuinely a curious person. And so this is another reason why we do the podcast. Yeah. It's so interesting. I asked you, like one piece of advice or a tool you could give someone when they're starting out, you're like, just be more curious. And that is just the podcast is amplifying our curiosity. So you gave me a lot of things today. I just wanted to thank you for coming on the show. If people love the show, they want to go listen to your podcast, maybe want to network with you, kind of get acquainted in there in whatever type of fashion they want to, how would you recommend people get in touch?
Don't call me. I don't answer my phone. If you hear my message, you'll hear that exact same thing. I'm the number one texter in the world, but I'll never answer my phone. But the podcast is called Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. Your episode comes out sometime, I think, sometime in late June. So depending on when this comes out, and that's at zenandtheartofrealestateinvesting.com. That's where that guest directory that you talked about is there. And my hub site is Trust Greene with an E at the end. And that's really my handle on social media. I'm very easy to find. I respond to my own DMs. That's how we met. And I've had lots of guests that I found just through DMs. But like we were saying, there's that subset where I send the DM. They're like, oh, hey, yeah, we're connected by this. And then there's a subset who's like VA responds to me. And I'm like, oh, all right, let's see. I mean, this isn't going to go well, over time. But I'm pretty easy to find. And I'm very good at responding to, like I said, better questions. Don't ask me, how can I become a real estate investor? It takes me way too long to learn what I would need to. But I do lots of Zooms for people as long as the lead in is good, and I really don't charge for anything. I just like this shit. It's awesome. Thanks
Yeah,
for
you're
having me on. I liked you guys. I told you, I really appreciate that you're transparent. And I thought like right away, like doing it for the right reasons while also growing a brand, which I think is really modern, being smart and understanding like, hey, this is how we collect a lot of people. Not all of them are going to be great. Some are going to be hangers on, but the ones that make it through, like we're saying, and want to build relationships are the ones that are going to be great. So yeah, I really appreciate it. It was fun going both ways on these.
Well, I appreciate that, the kind words. When Ryan and I build this thing, we're not doing it to please everyone. It's too hard to do that. But to hear from somebody who's in a different generation who respects what we're doing, I just think and who's seen more success than us, I just think it's very cool. So I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you sharing your story. And thanks again.
Yeah, man. It was great talking to you guys again. Look forward to doing it more in the future.